De'Aaron Fox just made his debut with the San Antonio Spurs after a deadline trade with the Sacramento Kings, and we already got to see not only what they will look like with him, but why he wanted to go there so badly in the first place. The first thing that caught my eye about his debut is they started Chris Paul and De'Aaron Fox together. When the Spurs added Chris Paul in the offseason, the assumption was that he would play with them for the first part of the year and then potentially get dealt at the deadline depending on how well they were playing, because it's clear that they didn't have a chance to actually win the title this season. Presumably that's the goal for Chris Paul at this point in his career, and he's been good for them, but it also seems like he took the contract with them with the assumption that he was going to start, and that, at least in the first game, has continued alongside De'Aaron Fox. It's a very interesting combo, especially defensively. It didn't matter that much against a team like Atlanta, but moving forward, there are definitely going to be matchups where that is going to be a problem for San Antonio, and I wouldn't be surprised if Paul eventually moves to the bench or they change up some lineup things, because I don't think that's necessarily going to work long term, and I'd rather have someone like Chris Paul coming off the bench. You always have that perimeter creator, point guard guy out there. The other thing I noticed immediately was the pace was up for San Antonio. Obviously, when you have De'Aaron Fox, one of the fastest players in the entire league, you're going to play at a fast pace. That was a hallmark of what they did in Sacramento. But the Spurs are already a pretty high-paced team. They're top half of the league in pace. They're 11th in pace as of this recording. But I wouldn't be surprised if they get a little bit closer to that top 5 range with Fox out there, with him leading the break. Because again, before they didn't really have that outlet guy that was going to go and take off in transition, because a lot of times it was Chris Paul. And now with De'Aaron Fox, I'd expect them to not only continue to push the pace, but Fox's defensive style is a little bit more like risky, where he's going for steals, trying to get deflections. We saw that last night with a lot of turnovers from Atlanta. And again, I think that's going to lead to a lot of pace. And another hallmark for De'Aaron Fox, and something we saw last night, transition threes. Whether he's creating them for other guys, whether it's him in a dribble pull-up, his speed is such a weapon in transition that it opens up a lot of things, not only for himself, but as well as others. And that's going to be an interesting thing to continue to keep an eye on. But the number one thing to pay attention to here is how much easier everything is offensively when De'Aaron Fox is out there, because Devin Vassell is very good. They've got a couple of other perimeter guys that are nice at attacking closeouts or shooting, and of course they have Victor Wembanyama. But when Chris Paul is out there, it's just not the same. The downhill speed that De'Aaron Fox has makes everybody else's lives easier, and presumably is going to make Chris Paul's life easier as well. Less wear and tear on him, less responsibility on him offensively. And so it could be this force multiplier for San Antonio, where everybody gets better just because you're taking more efficient shots, because Fox is creating more, and you're having to do less if you're Chris Paul, if you're Devin Vassell, if you're one of these other catch and shoot guys. And that also extends to someone like Victor Wembanyama, who obviously has had a fantastic start to his career, but has had to do more offensively than I think anybody really expected at this point in his career. Part of that is because he's been capable of more offensively than I think most people expected, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw less shot attempts from Wemby, less of these bad, long twos that he's dribbling into just because they need to get a shot off. They're going to be more efficient offensively. The pick and roll combination with him and Fox is going to be fantastic, and importantly, they're going to be able to survive much better with Victor Wembanyama on the bench. When he goes to the bench in these games, it becomes clear how they desperately still needed a talent upgrade that, of course, now they have with Fox. But with him on the bench, you're looking at Chris Paul trying to create. I think Devin Vassell is one of the most overlooked players in the league, but still, that's not someone you necessarily want to just give the ball to and have him create all of your offense. And having Fox out there allows them to maybe not play Wemby so much, maybe survive a little bit better, at least offensively, with him out there pushing the pace, creating for others. And again, his speed, his quickness just creates so many problems for the defense, especially when you have a pick and pop big like Victor Wembanyama, or you have someone like Jeremy Sohan that's setting the screen and then Wemby's on the wing. They're just such a more dangerous offensive team now with De'Aaron Fox, which we knew was going to happen when they traded for him. Now, the important thing for Fox moving forward is the thing that has always been the elevator for him in terms of how well he's playing is his three-point shooting. That's been something that's been up and down for him throughout his career. When he's been really good, he's been a fantastic even pull-up three-point shooter, much less just off the ball. And for a San Antonio team that spaces the floor fine, but doesn't necessarily have a ton of elite three-point shooting options, that's going to be something that they're definitely going to need from him. If De'Aaron Fox is making pull-up threes like he was at times last year, the year before, it is going to be a problem trying to guard this San Antonio team with Wemby out there spacing. Harrison Barnes has had a nice season. Like I said, Chris Paul is like that other outlet for them. That is going to be the determining factor in the ceiling of this team. And I really think that offensively, they have made obviously a significant upgrade here, but potentially could make a playoff run just because of how good they are on offense now with Fox and Wemby. And defensively, they're going to be good too because Wemby is such a high impact defensive player. Again, the only other concern that I have for them is just how Fox and Chris Paul potentially play together. Is Chris Paul going to be willing to come off the bench? Because I don't think it's realistic to expect Paul to be not only the starting guard alongside Fox size-wise defensively, but also there's no more Trey Jones. So they kind of need another creator guy off the bench, and I think Chris Paul certainly would be that. But he didn't have a great experience in Golden State coming off the bench. That was an issue for him, and then he got put back into the starting lineup, and they just kind of went back and forth on it a ton. And that is, to me, one of the main storylines as we move forward with how well the De'Aaron Fox Spurs play is, can they make it work defensively with those two guys playing together, or do they have to go to Chris Paul off the bench? Now, obviously, the lineups can change as they get a little bit healthier. They're missing some guys, all that stuff. The deadline is always a weird time to have a debut and have everything get thrown in there because there's so many guys getting moved in and out, but that's going to be certainly something I'm going to be paying attention to. The other thing I would keep an eye on as well for Fox is he's had this finger hand issue that he's been dealing with, and last night he was messing with it a lot. Every time he had a layup or made a shot, he was looking down at it. I don't know if it's a situation where he was just so excited to play it with his new team that he ended up deciding to kind of push through it. It's an issue that he's been dealing with for a little while now, but obviously you want to make sure you are fully healthy. And as they go into the postseason, this is not a team that I would want to see in the West. I mean, obviously there's been a bunch of changes throughout the Western Conference with Luka, now with the Lakers, and Anthony Davis, now with the Mavs, but they are a much scarier team now in the postseason. You're not dealing with Chris Paul having to initiate offense. De'Aaron Fox is one of the best guards in the entire league, and having that alongside everything else they have is going to be super interesting. Obviously, if you're the Spurs, you're hoping that this goes well pretty quickly because you have to get Fox signed to that new extension. That's part of the reason why they didn't have to trade as much as a lot of people expected them to, because he has control over his future in the 2026 offseason as a free agent. Now, presumably, they're on the same page there and he wants to come back and all that stuff will get sorted out because he chose to go there. He had his preferences. He let the Kings know where he wanted to go because he had that leverage of the 2026 offseason looming. So I'm sure they will be able to get that kind of stuff figured out. And then from there, they just have to figure out what the other pieces are. I think Devin Vassell is perfect for them. De'Aaron Fox works really well. Of course, you have Wemby. What else can you fit in salary-wise while Wemby's on his rookie contract? What else can you find out there in terms of trade pieces? They still have a bunch of future first-round picks, obviously, of their own, but also from a team like Atlanta, they are going to have options over the next couple of seasons, and Fox fits nicely into the Wembanyama timeline, and I'd continue to look at players along that same age range as De'Aaron Fox, because even though Wemby is extremely young and he's going to continue to grow and get better, I would think about him more as in his prime now rather than going to be in his prime in 4 years, because with big guys, you never know, they can fall apart quickly, especially guys with the physical profile of Victor Wembanyama. I would be aggressive this offseason and trying to put together a championship caliber team in San Antonio, and adding De'Aaron Fox is a fantastic first step in that, as we saw in his debut. I can't wait to get even more information on him, watch him some more with San Antonio, as is the case with all of these trade deadline additions around the league in what has been an absolutely out of control deadline.